All right, so we're starting off with a navy blue base, and while this is drying, I am going to show you the colors we're using. So we're going to use all the colors that were included in your box. So we've got light pink, magenta, purple, mint, turquoise, and here on the end we've got a um, metallic magenta. Now with this, so in your box I included some of these little sequins, and so if you wanted to play with those and use those in place of the metallic magenta, or really, I mean, you can use them in any way that you want to, that would create a cool effect. So for example, anytime I add sequins, I just use regular Elmer's glue, but they can create kind of a fun little effect as well. So they're kind of like, I use them like top dots sometimes. And so I just wanted to give you two options. If you like additional sparkle, that option might be for you. And then also, one of the things that I did, and I like to do when I use these puck-shaped stones that have a nice solid edge, flat edge, it's hard to see on camera, but this is where I used my glitter. So after I created the stone, I decorated it with glitter. And on camera here, this looks kind of meh, but it's really pretty in person. It just adds a little bit of pizzazz to the side that wouldn't normally be there. So those are two additional options you can use on tonight's stone, the sequins and the glitter. Of course, optional. I know sparkle is not everybody's cup of tea, and that is absolutely fine. All right, so I've got my dotting tool set, and we're going to use the same stencil. And so this is the 16 arm stencil, and I'm just going to center that and then mark that on here. Oops. My stencil got a little shuffled. You got to be careful not to do that. I'm bad about that. And as you're marking your stencil, just mark as many lines as you think you may need. I usually only do 1, 2, or 3 because I figure by the time I'm working my way out, I've already established the pattern. But you can mark all of them or none of them, whatever you're comfortable with. There we go. And we've been using the 16 arm stencil for a while. In July, we are going to switch to multiples of 6. So it's a 6-12 stencil. This is an 8-16. So you can do multiples of 8 with this one. I have a strong preference for the 16 arm stencil. I don't know why that is, but I struggle a little bit with the 12, but we're gonna explore that next month. Just to shake it up. I'm gonna pop open my paints. All right, we're not going to dot, or I'm not going to dot with the navy so much. That was just my background color, so I can set that aside for later in case I need touch-ups. And then we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to use the yellow tool the yellow stick tool, and we're going to go into the magenta paint, and that's going to be our center dot. Nice big center dot. I rarely get my center dots perfect on the first try, but this time I think I did. That's kind of a good feeling. And then next I'm going to use, we're going to do 2 rows around the center. And the first is going to be our smallest row. So I'm going to use the blue stylus tool on the small end. And those are going to be our light pink dots. And I do those on the line. So I'm going to line up my stencil. So I've got a north, south, east, and west. And this might be hard to see on camera just because the light pink is very close to white and my lines are white. But I'm going to do all 16. I'm going to start with my north, south, east, and west. Then I'm going to cut that in half and do those center dots. And then I'm going to cut that in half again and go around one more time in the center. I really love using a gloss glaze, which you will see coming to you in August, but it makes it hard to see on camera. So I apologize for that. But if you do want to see the sample as you're working, don't forget to pull out your step-by-step page. All right, the next step I'm going to use my green stylus. I'm going to use the small end, and I'm going to make sure I have lots of paint on here, but I'm going to go up 1 row. So I'm going to leave just a little bit of space in between, and I'm going to make a set of purple dots in between each pink dot. So I'm going to turn this just slightly so that I've got my in-between at my top, bottom, east, and west here. And this should put you right about that first little tiny mark row, but again, spacing is kind of personal preference, so that might be a little different for you. But I'm going to add a second row of purple dots. And I'm going to do all 16 spaces, and so these are the ones in between your chalk lines. And it may seem like I bounce around, but the reason why I skip rows as I'm doing the dots is because that will help keep them centered. So once I have 2 dots, I know that I want to make this one here in the middle, right in between those 2. Kind of helps with spacing a little bit. Sometimes I know I repeat myself on this stuff, but I realize everybody doesn't watch every Zoom that we do. I'm just going to adjust this one a little bit. I'm being picky, but that one felt a little too far out. For the next step, I'm going to use the blue stylus on the small end. And this is where I'm going to take this tiny end and we're going to make these 2 small dots that fall in between each one of these purple dots. And so for this, I don't dip in between each dot in the segment, but I do redip in between each segment. And so these green dots fall on the line, and I'm just going to go 1, 2, and then move to the next line. 1, 2, and then move on. And those are really small, but that just fills up some of that space. It'll look much better, of course, once we get rid of those white lines. And then the next tool we're going to use is our purple rod there. And we're going to go into the magenta paint. And we are going to put 1 magenta line on, or I'm sorry, 1 magenta dot on every other line. And these fall on the lines where the pink and then the green line is. So just above that green, 2 green dots, I'm going to apply pressure right about here so it falls close to the edge. My purple stylus, the edge of my purple stylus is right about this line right here. So when I make my dot, it lines up kind of just next to that next row.
Which pink is this? I'm sorry.
The magenta pink, the darker pink.
Thank you.
Welcome. And we're going to do 8 of these, so it ends up being every other line. So I'm going to do my north, south, east, and west. Turn it, and then do my north, south, east, and west one more time. Step is going to be our green stylus. I'm going to use the fat end and the light pink. And we're going to walk the dots around these circles. So I'm going to start by using the fat end and putting the center dot first, right next to the magenta dots. And I'm going to go all the way around with these. And once I have all 8 of the light pink dots, I'm going to switch to the smaller end. And then I'm going to walk the dots on each side. So you can probably fit, let's see, I'm going to guess about 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, 6. I went to 6. So you can do 5 or 6 on each side. Once you go all the way around, switch to the other side. It might be a personal preference whether you do both sides at once, or if I like to do one side and then go around and do the other side, but as long as you get it done, there's no right or wrong. The next tool I'm going to use is the purple rod here and the turquoise paint. And for this step, we're going to start some of these swipes. So I'm going to leave some space between where I want the dot to be and where it's going to go, because I want to be able to swipe that. So I'm going to go just, if you're following the lines, I'm going to go just beyond this next line. If you don't have the lines, you just want to kind of put them out a little bit, and it's every other line in between the pinks. So I've got my set of pink dots here. So I'm going to go in between those with a turquoise dot. And make sure you leave enough room that we can get a swipe in there. Now, because I'm going to pull these into, I call them pins. I think they look like map pins. So I'm just going to go around and just add a little more paint to each one of these dots. I don't need to smush them. I'm just kind of tapping a drop of paint in there. That will help me pull my line a little bit. And so you can either use a fine stylus and you can just pull your swipe down, or you can use your pencil, whichever is easier for you, and you can pull that swipe down and kind of shape it. So I want this to look like a map pin. So I'm going to keep the circular area. I want it to be a circle up here, and then I'm just going to pull that pin down. If you like more of a teardrop shape, that's fine too. Do whatever your preference is. And then the next step, we're going to use the green stylus, the large side, and we're going to add these green swoops next to each one of these turquoise ones. So this green pin is just going to go on each side. And so to start that, kind of right where the circle stops, like you've got this circle, I'm going to go just below it where the pin part starts, and I'm going to put a dot. And I'm going to do one on each side. And then you can flip your stylus over and just pull that, and I pull it towards the point of that pin. And so I end up with the turquoise and 2 dots on each side. One of the downsides of Zoom is it's kind of grainy, and so it makes it a little harder to see. And once you have all 16 of those done, I like to just go around with the large end of the stylus again and just redot those. Sometimes when you pull from your dots, it changes the shape a little bit. So I just want to make sure the end of these is nice and round. Next tool I'm going to use is my blue rod, my blue stick, and we're going to use light pink. And I'm going to add a light pink dot in between the turquoise sections that we just did. So we're going to go back to the pink row right here. And then this dot for me, I'm going to put down slightly, so kind of in line with the light green and not the turquoise. So down just a bit, but make sure you leave yourself enough room. So I've got the magenta and the pink, and now we're doing a larger light pink dot. And those go in between, and so there will be 8 of those. Sometimes when you're working with larger dots, or even sometimes with the small dots, what will happen is where you have your chalk line or your mark line, sometimes that line will not allow the paint to be a perfect circle. And so I noticed on this one, the circle's kind of funny. You can always go in there with a smaller tool and just mess it up like I did. Just fix your circle if you want to. So some of my circles are kind of funny and I just need to clean up the edges. Then the next step, I'm going to go back to my purple rod. We're going to use that mint paint, the mint green. And outside of this light pink circle that we just made at the very end of the row, I'm going to put a mint dot. And so there will be 8 of these. And we are also going to pull this into a matte pen. So if you want to go around and just make these extra painty, extra blob of paint. And so just like we did with the turquoise, I'm going to use the small end of my stylus and I'm going to pull these down towards the pink dots. create those matte pins. And we are going to do the same process that we did with the previous layer here. We're going to use the green stylus, and then I'm going to put a turquoise dot on each side of these. So this section here is the same thing we just did here, but we reverse the colors. So I'm going to dip into my turquoise, and I'm going to put a turquoise dot on each side, and then pull that inward. And so for these, I'm pulling down to that matte pin point at the bottom. And I didn't leave myself as much spacing. You can see on this one, I didn't have quite as much spacing. So up here, my pins are larger. Up here, they're smaller. Sometimes it's like that. Next, I'm going to use my purple rod and magenta paint. And so in between these green dots, we have a line, and I'm going to put a magenta dot right next to that turquoise dot. I want to leave room around the edge to walk some dots around. So I've got 8 magenta dots right next to that turquoise. And so we are going to walk the dots around this magenta. And so for this, I'm using my blue stylus. I want these to be finer dots. And so I'm going to use the large end for the center. I'm going to do all the centers. And then I'm going to come back and use the small end to walk along the sides. And so I'm using purple and then pink. And so I'm going to go around first with my blue stylus, large end, and I'm going to add a purple. Right in the middle. And then once I get my center dot, I'm going to flip it over and just walk the dots down the side. I ended up fitting 6, but it might be a little different for you. once you have all of your purples, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my light pink. Same sizes. I'm going to use the blue stylus, the large end, or the center dot, and then I'm going to walk the dots on the side with the small end. Next thing that I did was green stylus, large end, purple paint, and I just added one dot in between each open section around the edge. So here in between the pink and the green, I added a dot, and then between the green and the next pink. And I just tried to center it. And then as far as the design goes, that is it for the design. I like to leave top dots up to you. So on the sample, I did wherever there was magenta, that's where I added the magenta metallic as a top dot. So on this sample, I used the metallic paint. On this one, I'm going to use some of these sequins for my magenta areas. And I just apply those. You can use Elmer's glue, like white glue. You can use a glue stick. And sometimes I'll show you what I do. Is whenever you're using a glue stick, you can kind of use your stylus and get some of that glue on there to pick up the sequin. And then once you have the sequin, you can I just put some glue there. Now it depends on how firm you want it to be, how firm you want the hold to be. You can absolutely use super glue and just put a dot. That's totally up to you. So here's the difference between the sequin and the metallic paint. So that's what I did with the magenta. And then where the pink dots are, I layered purple and then another light pink. So it was pink, purple, pink, if you want to do that. And then Wherever there was turquoise and green, I alternated those colors. So if I've got turquoise on the bottom, I did green on top. If I have green on the bottom, I did turquoise on top. But I'd like to encourage you to play around with your own top dots and then post in the group and let's see what you end up with. And that's all I have for this creative challenge, the Tropical Garden Creative Challenge.